Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a demonetized channel to see the world from a different perspective. Today is the last day of 2022, and DFTW is still alive after being demonetized for a year. The curtain of 2022 is falling, and we hope all of us can leave back experience behind us. Today, we talk about Qin Gang, China's new foreign affairs minister, successor to Wang Yi, who has recently been promoted to a high-rank leader. In the past months, we made several videos about Qin Gang's interviews with US media, and most viewers should have known him already. Still, we want to introduce him here. Qin Gang was born in March 1966, and has taken various positions in the Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry for many years. He became well known for his fierce but wise question-answering style when he served as the spokesman. Many Western media label him as a wolf warrior. He was vice foreign minister when appointed as China's ambassador to the United States in 2021. He stayed in the US for 500 days and tried his best to improve the relations between the two nations. Qin Gang gave many joint interviews to the US mainstream media, which we have introduced in previous videos. In a joint interview with more than 10 media agencies, he answered more than 20 questions without stopping. However, no media conveyed his voice to their audiences after that interview. In another interview, he was interrupted 23 times by the host, but each time he faced difficult questions, he always responded calmly. Qin Gang was nicknamed a wolf warrior during his tenure as the spokesperson for his aggressive question-answering style. At a regular foreign ministry press conference on March 5, 2014, in response to Japanese media criticism of China's rising military spending, Qin said, "The Chinese People's Liberation Army is not just a Boy Scout with a red-tasseled spear. Some people abroad always hope that China is an overgrown Boy Scout," he told the Japanese reporter. "I would like to point out that China is huge, and the international situation is very complicated. Under such circumstances, it is perfectly reasonable for China's defense spending to increase moderately in line with China's economic development, and there is nothing to make a fuss about. Who would maintain the country's national security if China were not strong? How could we maintain world peace? If that were the case, would China be at peace? Would the region be stable? Will the world be peaceful?" It is a little ironic that a Japanese reporter raised such a question criticizing China's military spending. In the 1930s, Japan invaded China when the Chinese did not have enough money to spend on its military. If the People's Republic of China were like the Chiang Kai-shek's Republic of China, who could protect 1.4 billion Chinese people? The United States will spend around $860 billion on its military in 2023, multiple times more than the Chinese and Russians combined. We have not seen any Japanese, including the Japanese Prime Minister, challenge Joe Biden for America's massive military spending. Qin Gang is not the only wolf warrior. He has fostered several outstanding successors like Hua Chunying and Zhao Lijian. Chinese spokespeople must be wolf warriors, as they need to fight back when facing malicious provocations. Qin Gang is also humorous when replying to questions as a spokesman. On May 9, 2014, in response to US President Barack Obama's remarks that the United States will be the leader of the world for the next 100 years, he chuckled, saying that the world does not have a Paul the Octopus who can predict the future. Qin Gang was polite and did not say that a new world leader is overtaking the US in the coming 100 months. Obama is still young, at least not as old as Joe Biden, so he can testify shortly when the United States becomes the world's number 2. On the evening of February 9, 2021, at a briefing held by the Foreign Ministry, a German journalist said that some people in Europe are currently questioning whether China is trustworthy because some Chinese media and officials have mentioned the Pfizer vaccine deaths and believe that China is doing so as a manifestation of wolf warrior diplomacy. Qin Gang replied that China has never spread rumors or false information. Instead, it has been the victim of various rumors and false information. He added that Chinese media reports on the problems with vaccines in Europe were quoted from foreign media reports. He pointed out that, like any other country in the world, the primary duty of China's diplomacy is to defend the sovereignty, security, and development interests of its own country and its dignity. Faced with all kinds of crazy attacks against China, Chinese diplomats should stand up and say no, which is entirely different from just showing strength. How can someone call people names without reason, and not let them talk back? Qin Gang is a highly professional diplomat familiar with different departments of the foreign ministry, and has experience in relevant departments both at home and overseas, able to handle all kinds of challenges. On March 20, 2022, Qin Gang was interviewed by the CBS Face the Nation program to explain China's position on the Ukraine issue. While answering questions, Qin Gang's speech was interrupted 23 times by host Margaret Brennan, but he remained calm. Some American netizens said the host was very rude and unprofessional. Margaret Brennan asked Qin Gang on the CBS program whether China intends to throw Putin, a life preserver, by providing weapons and money after President Joe Biden warned China not to support Russia. In response, Qin Gang stressed that the claim that China is providing military assistance to Russia is false information, which China opposes. China sends food, medicine, sleeping bags and baby formula to the Ukrainian people, not arms and ammunition to either side. He reiterated that China is against the war and will do everything possible to push the situation to cool down. In response to Brennan's statement that China is condoning rather than condemning the Russian side, Qin Gang stressed that China makes independent judgments based on the merits of the matter itself. On the one hand, China abides by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and respects all countries' sovereignty and territorial integrity, including Ukraine. On the other hand, the Ukrainian issue has its complex historical warp and woof. Qin Gang said that condemnation could not solve the problem. The most urgent task is to persuade and promote peace and negotiation, and China has been persuading peace and promoting negotiation, calling for a ceasefire to stop the war, and will continue to do so. Condemnation will not help. We need wisdom, courage, and effective diplomacy. He pointed out that China maintains good relations with Russia and Ukraine and maintains close communication with the United States, Europe, and other parties, allowing China to speak to all parties involved in the crisis. Therefore, China positions itself to help resolve the crisis peacefully. At the end of the interview, Brennan purposely threw in the so-called Xinjiang human rights issue, questioning whether the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, who would be visiting China, would be able to visit freely. In response, Qin Gang stressed that there is no such thing as human rights violations. He also said that China is maintaining close communication with the High Commissioner for Human Rights and has reached a consensus. Of particular note, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, visited Xinjiang in May 2022 and refused to label China as a human rights violator. A new UN High Commissioner, Volker Turk, was chosen in September 2022 to come out with a tailored conclusion. It is more like black humor. It is worth mentioning that in the 9-minute interview, Brennan interrupted Qin Gang 23 times. In contrast, none of the U.S. Defense Secretary Austin, U.S. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, and others were interrupted. Host Brennan was not only impolite but also engaged in a differentiation approach that has sparked controversy. Some netizens said Brennan's interruptions were rude and preconceived, designed to undermine Qin Gang's answers. One user taunted, "This is not an interview but a poor cross-examination. Brennan was incompetent." Another netizen noted, "Mr. Qin Gang is an ambassador. Shouldn't we listen to what he says to understand China's position? The US can't change China's mind, so why not listen and make a better judgment? Promoting a narrative that China doesn't acknowledge is useless, has no strategic value, and is probably only emotional catharsis." Some netizens pointed out that the host violated the most fundamental principle of the news industry. Some netizens also praised Qin Gang for his calm response. Mr. Qin Gang is now the Chinese foreign minister, succeeding Wang Yi, and we hope he can connect China to the world more closely.